Welcome back to the channel and to our Volkswagen diesel-powered Chevy S10 project. After many months of turning wrenches and fabricating parts, well, the truck is finally street legal and ready to drive. Under the hood of this vintage truck, you can see the obnoxiously loud diesel engine. The normally front-wheel drive engine was mated to the rear-wheel drive Borg-Warner T5 transmission by using an adapter kit. A link to the kit and to a bunch of other parts used in this build are in the video description. The purpose of this project is to build a light-duty, simple, and fuel-efficient pickup truck on a really tight budget. Of course, we've had our ups and downs, but the project continues to move forward. Today, we're going to begin our road testing of the truck in order to gather data, and we'll use that data to improve the truck if possible. But before we get started, let's look at some hard numbers. So I gathered the published data on both the Chevy S10 and the diesel Volkswagen that we pulled the engine from. First, let's compare the gear ratios of each vehicle and see how much of a difference there is in the drive systems. So let's look at the Chevy S10 first. I plugged in the data for the axle ratio, the tire height, and the ratios for all 5 forward gears on the Borg-Warner T5 transmission. Then I calculated the vehicle speed when the engine's at 2500 RPM. So if we look at 5th gear, which has a 0.86 gear ratio, at 2500 RPM the truck will go about 59 miles per hour. Now 2500 RPM is close to where the Volkswagen engine makes its peak torque, in case you're wondering. So remember, at 2500 RPM the truck will go about 59 miles per hour. If we look at the Volkswagen data, at 2500 RPM in 5th gear, the Volkswagen will go about 57 miles per hour. So the transmission in the truck is pretty close to the transmission in the Volkswagen as far as gear ratios go, although the Volkswagen does have a better mechanical advantage. So if I put the Volkswagen data on the Chevy page, we can see overall the ratios are close, not exact, but close. So as far as the gear ratios go at 2500 RPM, the speeds are close enough. Now the big difference is of course the weight. I really don't know how much the Chevy weighs, and the closest estimate I have is 2,600 pounds for a bare bones truck with a slightly lighter Volkswagen engine in it. This is subject to debate, but it's the numbers I'm using today. On the other hand, the Volkswagen weighs about 2,100 pounds or thereabouts. No matter what, the truck's going to be heavier than the Volkswagen, and that's pretty much a guarantee. I reckon there's also a big difference in aerodynamic drag. The square body Chevy is shaped like a brick, but it's a nice shape and I really love the way it looks. The drag coefficient on the Chevy is 0.42 to 0.45. It's hard to say. This information is not published by General Motors and it was calculated. On the other hand, the published coefficient of drag on the Volkswagen is 0.36. So the smaller the number, the less drag, and the Volkswagen clearly has less drag. Actually, the Volkswagen has a slightly better mechanical advantage when it comes to gear ratios. It's lighter and it has less aerodynamic drag. So if you're a numbers person, well, those are the numbers. And if you're not a numbers person, well, the bottom line is the Volkswagen engine in the Chevy S10 will not make the truck go faster. Meh, let's just take this thing for a ride. The glow plugs were powered for a full 15 seconds, but I cut most of that out because who wants to watch me hold a button for 15 seconds? Off camera, I've been doing a bunch of little jobs in order to get this truck back together. It's still far from being finished, but at least now it has seat belts and a few other things. I think the only thing that doesn't work on this rig is the horn, and that's sort of next on the list. The windshield has a weird amber tint to it, and I've never seen that color before on a GM vehicle. You know, other than the power brakes, this truck has 0 options on it. However, I did change the door glass to factory tinted glass that's made for an air-conditioned truck. It's a very mild tint and it's hardly noticeable. For your enjoyment, I placed the GPS speedometer right here. This is the same speedometer that we use on all our test vehicles, and it's been calibrated to show actual speed. These speedometers are adjustable, and when I say it's been calibrated, I mean it's been adjusted to display the true speed. I've actually spent quite a bit of time getting this odometer to read true speed. Anyway, someday when I get rich and famous, I'll be able to afford another speedometer just for the metric crowd. But for now, we only have this one. Don't worry, I'll do the metric conversions at certain points during the drive. This truck has only been driven around town, and today we're taking it outside of town to see how it performs at cruising speed. So far, so good. I have no complaints. The truck is 36 years old and the engine's 40 years old. The truck had 175,000 miles on it when I bought it, and for the most part, it still rides very nice. In the previous video, I had to replace the transmission, and so far the replacement transmission's been holding up to the angry little diesel engine. The engine that we're using in this truck is known as an indirect injected diesel, and that means the cylinder head has pre-chambers. This older type of engine is a bit more noisy. The more modern Volkswagen diesel engines are direct injected and are significantly more quiet. When I started this project, my plan was to use this 1.6 liter engine for two reasons. The first was the engine was free and it was a good runner. The second reason was we could get most of this project done with the little engine and then swap in a more powerful engine. The holy grail of Volkswagen diesel engines is the ALH variant. It's a powerful TDI engine that shares a lot of its architecture with the older 1.5 and 1.6 liter diesel engines. Well, it turns out that the ALH variant is not going to fit in this truck the way I hoped it would, so no worries, I've set my radar to the 1Z AHU engine. Turns out the 1Z engine makes a decent amount of power, and all the custom parts I fabricated for this swap will bolt directly to that engine. On the other hand, if I did go with the more desirable ALH engine, I would have to do a lot of cutting to the chassis in order to make it fit, and I'm not going to do that. Now at this point, it doesn't really matter, because here in Kansas, any Volkswagen diesel engine in decent condition is hard to find, but I keep searching for the best deal. Keep in mind, this channel operates on a very small budget. Obviously, if we had a bigger budget, we wouldn't have an issue sourcing a good engine. Yeah, we'll find one at some point. Anyway, at 60 miles an hour, this truck feels great. It holds the road pretty nice, and it doesn't rattle too much. You know, this truck was built in the 1980s, and there's very little plastic used in its construction. Pretty much everything is cheap stamped steel. It's a very simple truck that doesn't require specialized tools to work on. The only real drawback with this diesel conversion is the injector pump is hard to work on given the way the engine's placed in the chassis, but it's not impossible to get to, so that's good. When it comes to cars versus trucks, I prefer cars. I'm not really a truck person. To me, trucks are tools that you drive. Well, in my world, that's the way it is, but a lot of folks don't see them as tools, and I get that. The other S10 that I own has sort of changed my mind a little bit. I actually like driving that truck. I think that the S10s and the Ford Rangers from the past were great little trucks, and it's too bad they don't make them anymore. Okay, let's do an acceleration test. Now, keep in mind, this is the very first time I'm driving this rig, and I'm not familiar with everything, especially the shift points for the engine and transmission combination. Today, we're going to be doing a 0 to 55 mile per hour and a 0 to 60 mile per hour acceleration test, and that's to establish a baseline data point. You know, a stock Volkswagen Jetta with the same engine can accelerate to 60 miles per hour in 18 seconds, which is considered slow by any standards. Plus, when you factor in the weight of the truck and the tire size and gear ratios, well, the Jetta certainly has an advantage. Just a quick recap, we're running a normally aspirated 1.6-liter diesel engine that makes 54 horsepower on a good day. The little engine generates 73 pounds-feet of torque at a lazy 2,300 RPM, and the estimated weight of the truck is 2,600 pounds. The weight, well, that's questionable. I believe the truck is probably a little bit heavier. The ambient temperature is in the 70s, which is not bad for November, and today, there's very little wind. This time of the year, wind is always going to be a problem, but not today. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, place your bets. Is this truck going to be faster than an old school diesel Jetta, or are we about to set a new record for the slowest vehicle on this channel? Well, she ain't fast. The surprising thing is I had to dump it in 5th gear to get it to 60 miles per hour, and once I put it in 5th, it took a while to pick up speed. So a bone stock 1985 diesel Volkswagen Jetta, a car that's considered extremely slow, is significantly faster than this truck with the same engine. I can't say that was a big surprise, but there's hope. We can definitely make this thing go faster. Uh-oh. Well, the good news is the truck runs great and it sounds great too. The bad news is the oil pressure. It's extremely low when the engine's idling, so we definitely have problems. But we also have the other S10 with a tow strap, so we ain't stuck out here in BFE if things get worse. Anyway, let's have a look at the problem. This is the oil pressure gauge and it's connected to the oil filter location on this engine, so it's reading the full pressure that's coming out of the oil pump. Now, with my foot on the accelerator to force a slightly higher idle, I'm showing 6.5 psi of oil pressure. Once I take my foot off the accelerator, the pressure drops to nothing. Nothing is, well, nothing, and I'm afraid that's a bit too low. Let's get this thing back to the shop and see what's going on. Well, the good S10 made it back to the shop without any problems, although it is a little bit low on gas. And in other news, the diesel S10 made it back without any issues. It would seem that the oil pressure problem is only at idle. Now, I did some research and there can be a few reasons for the low oil pressure. The intermediate shaft bearings are likely what's causing our problem, but that's not all. This is a snapshot of the bottom side of the engine when I was working on the oil pan about a month ago. It turns out that in 1985, some of these diesel engines were manufactured with an undersized oil pump. You see, in early 1985, some of the engines were made with a 26mm gear in the oil pump, and later in that year, they started using 30mm gears in the oil pump. Now, I don't know if this engine's an early 85 or a late 85, but it is an 85 engine, so we may have an issue with the oil pump. The good news is modern replacement oil pumps have 36mm gears, so it wouldn't hurt to replace the oil pump. Now, the intermediate shaft bearings, well, that's likely the main reason for the low oil pressure. You really can't see the shaft in this snapshot, but over here you can see the shaft poking out of the front of the engine. This shaft runs through the entire length of the engine, and it's what drives the oil pump. Anyway, for some reason, the bearings that support this shaft can be problematic, and when they wear out, they'll cause a drop in oil pressure at idle. Actually, if you dig deep enough into the many informative posts on the internet, it's always recommended to replace these bearings whenever the oil pan is removed. Well, shucks, I wish I knew that a few months ago. So these are the gauges that I installed to monitor the oil pressure, the engine temperature, and the voltage. The cool thing about these gauges is they have an alarm if something goes out of range. Now, an alarm is good if you bother to set it, and I haven't got a chance to do that yet. These instructions, I'll do it someday. Anyway, the engine has had a chance to cool off, and when I start it, I'm actually getting decent oil pressure at idle. Now, I'm running Shell Rotilla 15W40 oil in this engine, and theoretically I could go with a 50 weight oil and possibly some sort of elixir like STP, but really, that's like putting a band-aid on the problem. Since I have the skills, the tools, and the time, the right thing to do is to yank the engine out of the truck and replace the intermediate shaft bearings and the oil pump. Obviously, that's not easy to do, but I can do it, and it's not very expensive to do for someone like me. It'll be interesting to see if this engine has the smaller gears in the oil pump and if replacing the intermediate shaft bearings plus the oil pump will resolve the problem. You know, if I had a nickel for every time I removed this engine, I would only have about, 25 cents. I'm never going to get rich doing that. Anyway, I can't in good conscience continue to drive this contraption knowing that there's something wrong with the engine. You know, if I ignore the problem, this guy and his buddy Blue will have some more really good content, and I don't want to be on his channel just yet. Although I do watch it every Saturday night, and I look forward to the carnage. Anyway, the engine has to come out and we'll figure out what's going on. It's just another bump in the road. At some point, we'll get this stuff all figured out. Oof, the oil pressure's dropping really quick. Well, that's going to be it for today, and we'll see you next time. Until then. Well, that escalated quickly. 6 hours ago, this was a running and driving truck. Not so much anymore. As you can see, the engine's out and the last of its fluids are being contained. I'm definitely getting better at removing the engine, and that's the sort of skill I'm not interested in improving on, but I am. It may come as a shock to some of you, but today I discovered that the back of this truck is a great place to store all the parts. Anyway, it's Saturday afternoon and this video has to be uploaded in a few minutes, so this really is the end of the video. Consider subscribing if you want to see why the engine has low oil pressure at idle. We'll see you next time. Until then.